The voice of the young generation is not being heard enough by national politicians and in Brussels. Their climate marches have not yet led into concrete political actions. And at the same time, the coronavirus has a huge impact on their daily lives. These young people are the future leaders of our generation, and they will mostly bear the consequences of the policies that are now implemented. This evening, we will speak about the Gen Z Manifesto, a collection of letters written by young Europeans from Romania to Portugal and from Bulgaria to the Netherlands. The manifest is an initiative by Dilara Bilgiç, who wrote a letter to her fellow Europeans to call for action. Tonight, we will listen to Dilara and why she started this initiative, and hand over the manifest to MEP, Member of the European Parliament, Samira Rafaela. After that, we will speak with a fantastic panel of young Europeans about what they want for their futures and what they need from their politicians. But first, we will hear from Amara van der Elst, who is here with us tonight. She is a spoken word artist who impressed the whole country in the Netherlands during Remembrance Day with her wonderful spoken word contribution. Amara, you're 19 years old, a proud part of Gen Z, I can say. And I have a few questions for you before we start. All right. Because you said in an article, in an interview a few weeks ago, that you write a lot of political and activist pieces. True. What do you think the power of spoken words can be in changing politics?
I think a lot of politicians could learn a lot from spoken word artists, especially in their choice of words. A few politicians I've seen are very well-spoken, know what they're saying, really stand behind what they're saying. But I also see a lot of politicians struggling to find their words or using just a poor choice of words that can be very hurtful, because words are very powerful and people don't always realize that their power can go multiple ways. You can use it for good, you can use it to build, but you could also use it to break.
Mm-hmm. And can you mention an example of a politician who uses words in a really good way, according to you?
I think we have one in our midst.
All right. So we will hear from her later on this evening. This is a good start, Amara. And secondly, how do you think that spoken word can be a way to unite young Europeans? Because we're here tonight together with a group of young Europeans that people are watching from all over Europe. How can spoken words create kind of a community?
I think spoken word is going to be a big part of our future because it makes very big topics really small and specific. And also, it makes it easier to discuss certain topics that would be taboo. And it's also, most spoken word pieces, they're short. So with the short attention span of this generation, that kind of comes in handy. So I think it's very fitting for the time.
Sounds good. You are going to perform a poem for us. Yes. What are we going to listen to?
You are going to listen to a story about a boy and how he uses words to inspire others.
So that's maybe also what we are trying to do here tonight, right?
Exactly.
I'm very curious. Please take the floor. We're going to listen to you and see you back after that.
A while ago, I was walking down the streets and saw a young boy getting beaten. I wanted to be a hero and interfere, but at times like these, I dive into fear. It's not fair. I'm still trying to show that I care about what's right, about the boy, because he got rights, right? So the next day I was walking down the streets and saw a young boy feeling beaten.
sitting there all alone, a lone bird with his wings cut off. I gave him my pen and paper. He asked me what for. I told him, create your own wings and show the world how you soar. So then he started writing, and he no longer felt beaten, because now he felt the beat and he knew how to kill it. He created life just by rhyming. Through his words, he fought crime in his hood, and he preached to anyone who'd listen. He told the kids that it's all right. He showed them all their human rights, but they didn't understand what those stood for. Human rights? You mean rights for all of us? He preached about reaching his goals, about having the right to write down whatever he wanted without being wanted, for his wings with which he flew through unknown territories. His reasoning rose higher than any of us could reach. Luckily, he was a good teacher. Because when he talked about the right to a home, he said the right to belong. The right to education teaches us the right to dream. The right to equality equals the right to be, and the right to freedom of speech means the right to change. And with the right to a family comes the right to love. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amara. Take a seat. And from this very fundamental European principles told through the story of a young boy, we go to a second story of tonight, which will be told by Dilara Bilgiç. And Dilara, you are going to tell us what Europe means to you and what you see as the main challenges of today as a young European. I would like to invite you to take the floor and to tell us what you have in mind.
This month, on the 9th of May, it was Europe Day. But what exactly were we celebrating? Glorifying, honoring, peace and unity in Europe. We were celebrating the anniversary of the Schuman Declaration, which is considered the cornerstone of the European Union. We were celebrating the fact that multiple countries had decided to bundle their power, scientific resources, and people into a safe haven. One in which a war of all against all would be unimaginable. It might come to you as a surprise that Europe Day, at least for me, is not about the EU. To me, it is about the capacity of people to unite their voices in order to create harmony and peaceful cooperation. About learning from mistakes made in the past and making changes to build a better future, build a stronger us. This capability to bundle ideas, ideals, and powers is not and should not be something reserved for the European Union. We saw, for example, how adolescents worldwide were able to unify their voices, initiate global climate strikes. We saw how they were able to put aside all differences, uniquenesses, and fight for the sake of a common interest, a secure home made possible by us all, for us all. That is one of the lessons we should take from the genesis of the EU, that countries, people, and ideas can unite, despite differences. That people, countries, and superpowers can put aside national or self-centered interests in serving a greater good, greater matter. That together we can achieve results and try to make our globe an inhabitable place for all of us, not just for those who were lucky to be born within the borders of your city, country, or union. Unfortunately, we are the living embodiment of a philosophical concept called the prisoner's dilemma. This dilemma shows how individuals choose not to cooperate on a completely rational basis, even if it is beneficial to do so. Why? because this prisoner's dilemma is being fueled by distrust and egocentrism. A clear real-life example of such a dilemma would be the climate. If we all would live fully eco-friendly, we would all benefit, right? What would happen if only one country would not care a fig about climate? We might not have noticed, and that single country would have benefited the most, since it would be living safely without breaking a sweat. What would happen if some individuals would be neglectful? Nobody might have noticed, and they would have still been sitting pretty. However, what if everyone and every country would reason this way? What if every country would be acting out of distrust and would be willing to choose for the option seemingly most profitable for their own country? The result is the current wretched situation. So, although the egocentric option might seem best for an individual, given that everyone else follows the rules, the moment we will all start to reason that way, no one will benefit. We will be digging our own graves. The only way to get the most profitable option is by cooperating. Only hand in hand, side by side, we can make a difference. Consider the global climate strikes as the inception of such a united world, a world in which we care about all people, all human beings, in which we realize that if we were born in another country or continent, we would right now, as I am speaking, be facing a struggle for life. We would be facing wars, occupations, earthquakes, floods, or poverty. Fortunately, we aren't. Fortunately, my stomach is full. My feet are dry. However, it hurts to know that my stomach is full because elsewhere someone is working to produce my nourishment under horrible circumstances. That my feet are dry while elsewhere superpowers, multinationals, and governments use their power to destroy wood, to destroy nature, in order to offer a comfortable life to the lucky part of the world, the ones that were blessed to be born within the borders of a safe haven. It's just me, myself, and I, right? No. I cherish the ideal of a time in which we, inhabitants of planet Earth, will take responsibility for the mess that we, together, made and are still, as I am speaking, making. I cherish the ideal in which the global climate strikes will turn out to have been the Schuman Declaration of this generation. That it will turn out to have been the onset of a united world in which we look further than the horizon of our boasted egos, further than our nationalistic interests. The poverty of Africa is not an African problem. The wildfires in Australia are not an Australian problem. The wars in Asia are not an Asian problem. These are all global problems. We should amalgamate to solve these problems as human beings, not as Asians, Africans, Europeans, Americans, or Australians. Not as pro-Israel or pro-Palestine supporters, but as humans, because that's what we need, a pinch of humanity. Unselfishness. Every life lost is one too many. And yes, I truly try to cherish optimism, despite the fact that we live in a world that seems to blow away every form of aspiration. But I do my utmost, despite all doom and gloom, to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. Because I believe that this small stone of hope can and should form the cornerstone of a blended unity. So, my message, especially right now, in times of a climate crisis, in times of a global pandemic, of seemingly eternal disunity, is quite clear. Humans of all countries, unite, please. Thank you.
think they should invite you at the United Nations to hold this speech, because it was so impressive. Or maybe even at the European Parliament to start with.
Yes, and both. It's so really impressive how you choose your words and how you think about the future of this world. It constantly shows that the younger generation should not be underestimated. You should be fully part of decisions that we make.
Yeah. Dilara, you're 18 years old. You also wrote a wonderful book when you were 17, The Black Box Democracy. I wanted to start actually with maybe also maybe a bit of a critical question. What should we do to overcome this prisoner's dilemma, what you described? Because it sounds really good, but I'm also looking for a way out or something. What should be done in order to overcome this natural?
Well, it's the key thing in the prisoner's dilemma. What really locks us all up is that distrust and that egocentrism. The moment we will all start to think, well, everyone does it. I mean, America does it, and Europe pollutes, so why would I follow all the rules? The moment we all start to think that way, to start to reason that way, that's where you come into like the center of this dilemma.
How do we get out of this?
Yeah, well, the way to get out of that is don't point to others, start yourself. And if everyone else doesn't follow the rules, who cares? I mean, I think it's all about, do you want to be like the example or not? Not about, well, they are doing it as well, so why would we follow the rules? The only way to get out of this dilemma is really to just say, you know what, I don't care, I don't give a fig about what other countries are doing. I'm just doing what I think is morally right now to do. That's the key. And it might sound too idealistic, but I think it's really the only way to get out.
Thank you so much. Last year, you approached the Forum on European Culture and company New Heroes to start this initiative because you wanted to make a call throughout Europe to speak with fellow Europeans about the future of Europe, right? And you wrote a letter, which was the start of this manifesto. For the people who didn't read it yet, can you tell a little bit more about what you wrote in that letter?
Well, basically, I'm asking for the youngsters all over Europe to share their ideas about their democracy, about European democracy. How do they feel about it? How do they feel about their society? And I was just really curious about their ideas, and I just wanted to investigate, how they feel about it overall.
And we received a lot of letters, as I already mentioned, really from Portugal to Romania and from Lithuania to Italy, and I think from 25 European countries or something. Was there one thing that shocked you most about the letters? Were you surprised, or?
There were really fascinating things that I can only say that I'm left with more questions than like at the start, because there was a letter of a 13-year-old, like that's just awesome, but he was writing about corruption, and that's really shocking to me, because if a 13-year-old wants to take the time to write a letter about corruption, then that makes me wonder, well, where does that feeling come from? Is it maybe a more widespread problem in his country? I'm really curious to hear more about such experiences. Because if you're 13 years old and you're already starting to talk about problems, then I think we should do something really quickly.
And what do you hope the impact will be? Because this is actually the start of something new, hopefully. What do you hope the impact will be of this manifest?
I don't really think this is just like you said, it's not like the end point or something. This is really the start. What I hope to do is lower the threshold for youngsters to, share their voices, but also on the other side, lower the threshold for politicians to investigate in what's going on when youngsters share their ideas. So it was two-sided, and I just wanted to, bring the two ends. Well, they're not ends, but they're mostly represented as ends, to bring them closer together. And yeah, I really hope that this will be like the start of. That's why we are giving it to a member of the Parliament today, the European Parliament, to for the politicians to take the next step, investigate what's going on. Why do you guys feel like this? There are really important things mentioned in this letter, and yeah, they're really short, the letters, so we should do deeper research. But like education has been mentioned. One person said, well, go to that meeting that you didn't want it to go to because you thought nobody would come with you, and stuff like that. It's really fascinating to read about it. So I would say, yeah, the next step is for politicians to take in the voice of the young generation.
Maybe the first step for now would be a kind of an official moment, and that is to really hand over. We ask you to hand over the manifest to Samira Rafaela, who is here today with us, to speak about the manifesto. So maybe you can give the first.
Yes, well, I think, I don't know if I stand up, it will be like for the audience, so I'll say first what I have to say.
Yeah.
On behalf of all like youngsters who wrote and who participated, and all like the companies who participated, I would like to hand you, as a member of the European Parliament, I would like to hand you over this bundle, and I really hope that it will inspire you and maybe even more politicians.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much.
A little bit.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, and thank you for your really brave initiative, because
Maybe a short reaction in the microphone, so all the people at home could also hear it.
so
We're very curious what you think, of course.
yes, no, I said thank you so much for your really brave initiative, because it gives me myself, a lot of hope when I see all these young people raising their voice and being so aware and so conscious of the fact that they have the right to be part of it. I mean, I am also part of a younger generation in politics. I was 30 years old when I was elected, and I remember the very first day when I stepped into the European Parliament, and I was like, so how am I going to survive this? Because there are not a lot of young people in the European Parliament, and I still nowadays experience that, when we bring in new ideas, when we bring in indeed that moral thinking, that new way of, ethical thinking in politics, we often sometimes end up in very difficult discussions with, I believe, sometimes a generation that is way longer there in the parliament, and just not trying to understand where we are coming from, because we are way more busy with our future. When it comes to climate, when it comes to migration, we want an ethical and human migration policy in Europe. We want this pandemic to make sure that people come out of it stronger. We have different ideas sometimes about these very important topics. Mm-hmm. And this is where we need to be engaged. And this is where we need to be part of new legislative decision making. So for me, it feels like a support to see these kind of initiatives, and to have a younger generation in society, watching us and watching with me together, to see where we go.
And Samira, can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to do with this manifest when you're going back to Brussels? How are you going to convince the older generation, as you just mentioned, that this is important?
Yes. Well, I had a tough week already with trying to do that.
All right, you started already.
On something with vaccines and, saving human lives. And how are we going to do that? So yes, I first of all, I will need to start reading all the stories, because these are a lot of stories, and I want to make sure that I understand each and every story very well. And I think it's very important for me and for my team, and I will also share it with some other young MEPs, So I am going to take more of them. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so that we can start analyzing it and see where, you know, there is this pattern that we can get out of it, because it would be very interesting also for us in the work that we do. We work on legislation, and to take into account a lot of, you know, good ideas and elements. I mean, I'm doing a youth tour myself now, and these conversations help me so much to really sharpen my work in the parliament. So yes, after analyzing all this, and I would also like to invite you to the European Parliament when everything is open again. I really hope that the both of you would be willing also to visit the European Parliament and to see what we can do also with other young people that would be interesting to speak to us. So I would be happy to organize that with you.
Yeah, I'd love to come.
Yeah.
Great. Great idea. This is also a good moment, I think, to introduce the other panelists of
Yes.
this evening. We didn't forget you. There is Ineta Buvide via Zoom. She's from Lithuania, and she is one of the persons who wrote a letter for the manifest. She's 18 years old, if I'm not mistaken. 17. Oh, sorry.
20 right now.
20 years old already. And you study political science. You started your studies last year, Ineta, right?
Yeah, just a correction. I'm from Latvia, actually. Like, the countries are so close. It's okay. Yeah, I started in Riga Student University. The program that I'm currently in is international relations. And what they are kind of focusing on is, in one side, this kind of theoretical basis, but on the other side, it's kind of more practical things. I just had a course on European integration, so yeah, this topic is really kind of interesting and important to me right now. So yeah.
Thank you so much. We will hear more from you later on, and you will be with us via Zoom. So please feel free to jump in whenever you like. And we're also going to watch a video from yours, so a warm welcome to you. And Talita Muse, she is also called Voice of Her Generation. She is specialized in how young people can actually amplify their voices and make their voice heard, both in politics and in businesses. Talita, I'm really happy that you're here as a specialist in how we should do this and how we could bring this initiative further. So a really warm welcome to you as well.
Thank
you. What is your first reaction to what you just heard?
I heard a lot of interesting things. I loved what you said about family. The value behind family is love. And we talk a lot about material things, and I think you really emphasized what are the values that are beneath it that are actually important to us. I really love that. And I think that really relates to what you're doing. I'm really wondering, how can we create a sort of a European network of young people who on a value level connect and explore what the European identity is? Because I think within the European Union we have had economical integration, we've had integration on other policies that came after that. And I think the next step is to really have a more cultural integration. I think that the young generation, you see it also with the movement of Volt in politics. I think that a younger generation that already feels that global citizenship, that is connected via internet and social media, has been brought up with already sort of international youth culture, has a lot of potential to create like this value-based European generation. And I think that will be very interesting. Mm-hmm. We can also build the institutions, the networks, the platforms, the organizations to do that. I really think it's the next step.
And can you maybe share with us an advice on where to start to build these networks and organizations?
I think what I've seen in the Netherlands, that in the Netherlands, the youth movement started in the 60s, and it was a protest movement because the voice of students was not being heard in housing and education. And after that, you got young people taking seats at college van bestuurders, at the boards of universities, mm-hmm. and then you had the rise of youth organizations. And I think that has all been very good and useful, but it has always been young people advising, writing manifests, telling what needs to be done. but not actually taking a seat within power. And I think that is the next step. And I think that's partly has to come from within, from a young generation. You already see that the average age is lowering within all institutions, in our national parliament, but also in the European Parliament. But I also think that the next step is that we really take seats at high-level decision-making. And yeah, I don't think we're going to be invited. I think we need to force ourselves upon these institutions. I mean, you can build alternative platforms all around, and I think that's very useful because there's the creative thinking, the rebellious thinking, and taking the streets. But I think you also need to be taking seats within the heart where the big decisions are being made. And I think that's really the next step. So not only writing the manifest, but claiming a position within the European Commission, within the European Parliament, becoming an official think tank that is invited to think about policies and really do the work.
Injata, how are you listening to this advice from Talita? Is it something you find realistic to do as a 20-year-old?
Yeah, but I don't really see that I would have support. Like, listening to you, it seems like the kind of, I don't know, like involvement in kind of uprisings, if you could say, or making a change or something like that. You have supporters there, like people are willing to stand up. I mentioned in my letter that you're probably going to read that in Latvia, there have been many situations when people who are trying to kind of stand up for something and kind of protest for something, they're just basically shut down. So I understand that it is scary, and at least for me, it's really scary to kind of stand up for something just because I know that I will get shut down. And kind of this pressure from the higher ups is scary, and I completely understand why many Latvians are so scared of some kind of a uprising. I mean, Latvian youth, like, yeah, so I see the perspective, and I know that it is valuable to do something and stand up for something, but at the same time, I don't know, maybe it's the post-Soviet thing, but it is not as kind of possible at this point. At least I believe so.
Injata, can you give an example of a moment when you spoke out against something or in favor of something, and what the reactions were?
I mentioned in my letter, and I think that this is a really good example. Last year, when George Floyd was murdered, a group of Latvian youngsters stood at the Monument of Freedom in Latvia, in the capital of Riga. And after that, the following kind of news articles that came out were just so completely, I don't know, like rude, and saying that it's irrelevant to do that, and there's no point. Like, what's the point? Why would we even care about the issues happening somewhere else? But at the same time, it impacts all of us. Like, we shouldn't live in a world where there's racism at the very least, or like not being able to accept other ethnicities and other cultures and other people. Like, we shouldn't have to live in that world. Well, at the same time, it was this big issue that they were kind of shut down. And I personally felt for that just because I did something of kind of similar to that in Dobel, in my local town, which is a really small town. But yeah, it's completely kind of, you feel powerless after somebody has kind of shut you down like that. And especially like bigger news outlets as well. Like in Latvia, we don't have that many. Like the biggest news outlets were saying that, yeah, that's irrelevant to do that. So yeah, it makes sense that people are not willing to do something.
Yeah, I can imagine you really have the feeling to stand alone in such a situation, and you would think twice if you go to the streets again, right? Dilara, you wrote, how do we create a democracy in which everyone has a voice that will be heard, right? And I think this is also an example of a voice that wants to be heard, but is sometimes really difficult. How do you look at those kind of situations?
Well, it's like, I think the reality is that youngsters are generally underestimated, not being taken serious, and sometimes people also use biological arguments like, yeah, but your brain isn't ripe, yeah, hasn't, and then I think, but that doesn't mean that my voice isn't valuable. It might be that I don't know everything about every single rule in laws, but that doesn't mean that my feelings or things that I feel or like. Racism, if I find that important, that doesn't, I don't need to have learned a law book to know that some things are just important. And that's something I do recognize when like the global climate protests and stuff like that started. In the Netherlands, you could hear like some media reporters and some politicians saying things like, yeah, but they're just protesting to miss classes.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
I was just like, do you have proof for that? Or is it just the feeling that you have to oppress my voice? Because that's something I see a lot. And I think the only way to break through is by proving that your voice is important, by starting initiatives, by going despite all the difficulties.
But what would you say to Injata, or maybe you want to...
I was thinking maybe also the countries who are more leading in this topic, because I of course admit that I think the Netherlands, when it comes to youth participation, is one of the front runner countries. Maybe it could do more in the European context to secure youth participation in other countries, and really make more policies on that to help. And I think also, if we look at ourselves from the Netherlands, I think we could also show more solidarity with other young people in Europe. When I'm now critical, thinking about myself, I'm not that often aware about what's going on with youth participation in, for example, her country. And I think we could also raise our voice more and speak out about the rights of other people, of our members of our generation. And I think we don't do that sometimes enough.
No. Or like what you said, start like a more European thing, a movement maybe, in which, other voices of countries where it is less easy to, involve them as well.
Yeah. Sounds like, hold this point. I'm going to ask it to Samira as well, because we have a politician here at the table, and I'm really happy, again, that you're here. I was wondering, how do you listen to the stories of both Dilara and Injata, that they're saying, we are just not taken seriously by a whole group of people? And Injata also says, I would think twice to go onto the street again. What would you say to them?
Yes, and in a way, I can relate to what they say about not always being taken into account when you have an opinion. In the case of Injata, it really hurts me. It really hurts me as a politician, as a human being, because it's really unfair. And this is exactly why we in Europe really need to speak serious about solutions that we need to create in the upcoming years to support youth movements, to invest in their skills and their capacity to be effective and to be an effective counter voice also. I truly believe that we should also invest more in subsidies, support from the EU, in what kind of way, to also support individuals like Injata, so that they can be part of a movement in their own environment, in their own country. So this is exactly what I find very important in my work, and also to ask for. But I do think that we can be definitely more sharp in the European Union when it comes to such individual situations that a lot of young people are in. So yes, we need to invest on the European level in skills and movements, youth movements.
And like Talita also just mentioned, what do you think of the idea of supporting European youth movement? So what if we would set up a movement here tonight with the whole group of the Manifest? How could we arrange that? Yeah. Or how could you arrange that as a European politician?
I think it's very important that these kind of movements start from, bottom up. It's the grassroots movements, right? And I think that we've already seen with Black Lives Matter the demonstrations, the protests, and also the protest on climate, you see how effectively young people can be in creating their own grassroots movement. And in the case of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, they have shown that they were so effective in putting pressure on our institutions. As a direct consequence of that was the European Commission launching an anti-racism action plan. I mean, that was really because of the pressure from the Black Lives Matter movement. So I think it's very important that we as politicians be very open and publicly open about the support that we give to such youth movements. And indeed, we should see where we can facilitate with the instruments and with the means that we have. Making sure that the young people are organizing themselves.
I very much like the idea as well, and at the same time I'm afraid that a lot of national politicians would say this is not something that the EU should deal with. I can imagine that the politicians in Latvia, for example, would say, please EU, get out of our country, we support our own youth movements, you don't have to do this.
Well, that's what I will decide on my own if I find it important. And many other members of European Parliament, I believe, find it very important to support the youth in Europe. And I think this is exactly when we get such resistance, then this is exactly where we need to focus on. Then this is exactly the kind of resistance that we need to confront. I mean, I feel like as legislators and as politicians, we need to protect our youth. We need to protect their fundamental rights. I would never back down from that. So,
Injata, I want to go to you. What do you think the reactions will be in Latvia when you start a youth movement with money from the EU?
I can just say, like, not saying any names or just doing anything like that, but just so you understand where I'm coming from. When I was in 12th grade, which means last year, we had a member of the European Union from Latvia, elected from Latvia, come to our school. And after the kind of discussion that we held, we had kind of like a seminar discussion thing like that. The remark that was given to our teacher was, I didn't know that the youth was so smart, like the 12th graders even cared about politics, like did they even understand what they were coming from, like what they were talking about. And it just basically shows that if an elected member of the European Parliament from Latvia is saying things regarding that, yeah, like the youth is not smart enough to do something and not it's not important to take them seriously, then what kind of movements can we talk about at the very beginning? So I don't know. I think it's a big risk. It can be done. Like there are a lot of people who are willing to rise up and stand for something and stand for actually the issues that like the world has and stand together and do something about them. But yeah, like there needs to be this push, and if kind of help and assistance from the EU could be possible, I think that it will be a great start. But like we have to live up until that point right now. So yeah.
I think this is an important contribution also for us here in Amsterdam to realize that the situation is so different in different European countries. But still, we try to find some common ground this evening and also try to inspire with maybe new initiatives and new thinking that might be of inspiration to Europeans.
One reaction to Injata, because this is also the very logical consequence, I believe, of a lack of diversity in our own institutions. I mean, if you don't have people with diverse backgrounds or more younger people in our institutions, then you find such institutions not to be sensitive and aware enough of the fact that this is important. So this exactly shows why we need more younger people in politics, and indeed, I agree with you, Talita, in very influential positions.
Is there like a EU ambassador, or like a special envoy, somebody who at a EU level watches over all the youth participation within the institution and also in the member states? A young person who is like watch
a kind of a youth ambassador.
The special position.
Well, I know that the member states themselves, they arrange, like for example, the UN and the EU youth ambassadors, which I believe is a very good initiative. Yeah. And furthermore, that is organized more also in the European Commission, in specific departments working on youth-related issues. But I would say I think we should centralize that also more. I think that would be very good.
Because we have a representative for foreign affairs, for example, from the European Commission. Yeah. We might suggest a representative for youth affairs.
Yeah, we have a European commissioner, of course, responsible for youth. But I think we can organize that also differently with having.
Yeah, because it also really helps having a centralized person.
Yeah. And Talita, I wanted to go to you as well, because you co-founded an initiative called Coalition Y. Yeah. And with this coalition, you aim for a structural place of opinions of young people in politics. And I thought that might be a good inspiration to see whether we could transport this to a European community as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I didn't found Coalition Y. I joined 1 year later after it was founded, because it started with het kinderpardon, having to do with refugees and children. But now the aim is to get more political influence. It's now even invited for the official negotiations of the formation of the new government. So I think that's historically a very big step for youth participation, to be at the table during such a interesting political process. Yeah, but we can learn from it. I think what Coalition Y does two things very well. I think the first is that we centralized all the youth organizations almost in the Netherlands. So everybody, there were a lot of, so from young people with a physical handicap to young women to lower education, higher education, young professionals already working within companies, students, they all had their own organizations, which is really good, because there's really specific expertise there and they can lobby on their issues. But you also have to say at some point, okay, we have 1,000 different youth organizations, but one thing that binds us all together is that we are young and that we're not being represented enough. So let's use that power. And by centralizing all that power, that means more media attention, because you can speak on behalf of hundreds, thousands of young people. And it gives you a lot of more voice. And I think that's the second thing that Coalition Y does quite well, is mobilizing the public opinion. Because when you don't have the situation where your voice is wanted, you can knock on the door endlessly, but you can also try to mobilize the support of other people. And I think having the media context, mobilizing the media, explain the media constantly why it's important. I think at some point the media sympathizes with young people, and that's our unique selling point when you're young, is that they always are looking for new faces.
I think this is also really specific for the Netherlands, I have to say, or maybe not only the Netherlands, but if I'm listening to Injetta and how they are presented by the media, I think it's
all
really
media
different.
The world loves new faces and new stories. That's an essential part of the media, that they always look for new. Look what happened to Greta. Or look what happened to
whether they will appreciate the voices of the new faces. I think that's what Injetta kind of pointed out, that maybe her face is, it's good that her face is there, but her voice is not always everywhere appreciated. I think that's really a sad thing. And just like you said, it would be really great if in Latvia, for example, but also in other countries, initiatives like Coalition Y would start or would be set up.
Yeah, I honestly, to be really honest, I think it's a bit of a pessimistic view to say there's no possibilities at all to let your voice heard. I'm half Peruvian. My mom's from Peru. In Peru, we just had a military coup, a little bit more than half a year ago. It was young people who took the streets for a week in a row and just sat on the ground. And they organized themselves, grassroots, and they forced the government that had that military coup to change and to quit what they were doing. And they had a complete government thrown over, and it was people with an average age of 15 who started that initiative, and they mobilized the international media via social media, saying this is what's going on in our country, and we won't back down until we have another government. So, I mean, I really don't believe it. All big social change in history has come from young people. So there's never, I think, a point in time where, your voice maybe not wanted, but if you keep on knocking, it will be heard at some point, because the sympathy is always with the young. That's just a
Could I
given.
chime in quickly?
Yeah, Ineta.
It is not that bad. Like, I maybe made it sound like really, really bad. but the baseline right now is that we have some people, we have non-governmental organizations. For example, we have, as Samira mentioned, the UN delegate, UN youth delegate in Latvia. Like, she's a really nice girl. She's really active and actively participates in different events and kind of spreads the voice of the youth. But if we look back, like take a step back, it's just one person at the end of the day. Like, one person cannot, like, I'm not saying all of the time cannot, but like mostly one person cannot be like the big change. But at the same time, yeah, we have non-governmental organizations. I'm myself involved in some. For example, I think last year enrolled in a Latvian non-governmental organization, which is kind of meant for kind of teaching debates. But the debating topics, the emotions are mostly kind of climate change and sanctions on Belarus and different things that are kind of important for the world. So it is not that bad. But at the same time, yeah, as I said, like we kind of get pushed down once we get too loud. So yeah, I just kind of have to overcome this kind of crisis, I think.
Yeah, and maybe it also helps if you have some European backup from all the people sitting here and all the people who wrote letters. I think it's really a moment where we also can create something new. I wanted to touch upon a point you made earlier, Talita, about that we need to make a transformation also to a more to becoming a more cultural unity. And we listened to Amara, of course, with a wonderful spoken word performance. And I was thinking, Amara, do you also see a role for spoken word in bringing Europeans together, in supporting this kind of platform? How do you look at this as a young European?
After the remembrance ceremony, I have become a lot more optimistic in my goal of bringing people together, because I've seen grannies to little kids replying to my story with love. And I've said some things that were really personal, and some things so personal that can, bring such a universal reaction that was amazing to me. So I think through words, through love, we can really find each other in the fundamental things. I mean, we have all these different cultures. Some people eat a warm meal at the beginning of the day. Some people eat a warm meal at the end of the day. Some people don't even get a meal in the day. And in the end, we just want to survive. We want what's good for our family. We want to feel love. We want to love one another. And when we realize that we've got so much in common underneath all those surface level differences, I think that's when we can really just talk and make moves.
Yeah, I think it's a really powerful way to create empathy and to create new relations. Do you already have a lot of contacts with fellow Europeans or with fellow European artists, or is it very much focused on the Netherlands?
I have some friends in Croatia. I did an exchange when I was in the dance academy. And also the performance I just did, I did it once before in Germany with a project called Roots and Roots. And that's really special to me. It's young people from the UK, Germany, and the Netherlands coming together to use all the different aspects of hip-hop to tell a story about. This year was human rights, you had who am I, identity, and all these issues that are so fundamental for young people, but also for people of all ages. And you just see how all these different ideas and all these different voices come together so strong in just 1 week. So imagine if we had that mindset of, all right, let's hear what everybody has to say and see what we can make out of that forever, then wow, it would be so powerful.
Yeah, it's a really good example, I think, and also a beautiful way to show that it doesn't always have to be like a political organization or a lobby organization, but it can also be more of a cultural organization or network that brings about understanding and a sense of a common identity or something. So thank you very much. I also wanted to introduce to you one of the other persons who wrote a letter for this manifesto. It's almost from Hungary, and he sent us a video. He couldn't be here live today, but he sent us a video and will tell us what he finds important that the youth should do for Europe's future.
Hi, I'm Amos Roger from Hungary, and I'm glad to be a part of this project as I think democracy is vital in our societies. I consider democracy to be a battleground of ideas, principles and interests that is open for everybody to take part in. It is essential, however, that you don't just stand by and watch, but actively participate in the conversation, as you have the responsibility towards yourself and anyone else who your issue may concern, to fight for them and to be willing to represent them. Activism is a key word in this struggle. Another important aspect of it is, though, that you can neither fight alone, nor should you be a blind fanatic. You should always motivate your friends and family and anyone else to participate, because the more active members it has, the more democratic a society is. On the other hand, you should have an open ear and heart for people who believe in different ideas, or even the opposite of what you represent. You should listen to them as well. I can see that nowadays these two issues appear ever more often in debates all across Europe, but I also think that we, youngsters, can bring some change. And this is why it is crucial for us to be active in the discussion as well.
Hungary. Almost wrote something interesting in his letter, I think, and that is that he said we should not be feared, and many people are feared to speak out these days. And I can actually understand that sometimes if you look at reactions people who do speak out get on social media, for example. And I was wondering, young people here at the table, I include you, Samira, do you also feel that fear sometimes? And do you sometimes not say something because of the reactions? Dilara, let me start with you.
Well, absolutely. I often feel like that pressure. Also, when I wrote the book, I have had the fear of, well, do I even have the right to, write a book about democracy? I'm 18 years old. I haven't done like a research of 6 years. So do I even have the right? So I had that, that insecurity. And after the book came out, I also, unfortunately, but it's part of the job. I received threats, hate, and it does hurt to receive it, and it does sometimes scare you off and makes you wonder, well, should I continue or should I tweet this or
what kind of threats did you receive? Because it's
it's really diverse threats. So to say, so it's really on a spectrum, but the most of the threats were regarding my headscarf and just you aren't even born in the Netherlands, but you're criticizing our democracy, so go away, go to your own country, or you don't have the right to speak up because you have a headscarf. I will come, tear it off, and then you can talk, and stuff like that. So that's not even that. What hurts the most? It's mostly criticism regarding who you are or who people think you are.
I can imagine that hurts very much, and that it also makes that you think twice, tweeting a different time or writing another book or something.
But it also gives me like the responsibility to speak up. Although it hurts, I am telling myself if I don't do it, if nobody does it with a headscarf. I mean, we in the Netherlands have recently someone with a headscarf came into like the House of Representatives, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, she received a lot of hate too, but despite all the hate, she continued. And I think that's the only thing we can do right now.
So these kind of examples, people who are doing it, unless, even though they get that negative reactions, etc., that might be an example or an inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just that inspiration that you think, you know, despite all threats, I'm just continuing because I want to, you know, add something to society and not just sit and do nothing.
Mm-hmm. Samira, what do you think about this question about fearing to speak out?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, of course, I'm experiencing that as a politician, as a woman of color, and I think it happened really fast. But even during my candidacy, when I was actually running for the European Parliament, it already started with discriminative and racist comments, and you know that happens still. Especially when I speak out about topics that are about discrimination or racism, or when I put out my very progressive opinion. And in the beginning, that's really distressing, you know, so you are not sure if what's happening to you. And especially on social media, people can do it anonymously. So in the beginning, I remember that I had this tendency to then censor myself. Well, let's not put out a tweet now, or you know. But of course, I got rid of that idea very fast because it's a mindset that you also need to work on. Like, you are elected, you have the right to be here, and you have the right to have your own opinion. And not only in terms of racism or discrimination, but also in terms of having, for example, a minority opinion. So when you're having an opinion in a certain group or certain setting where the majority does not share your opinion, but you do think that's the right and the moral thing to do, then also that can sometimes cause that you are in a difficult position where you will need to choose, like, will I uphold my values and will I fight this fight even though I know that I'm a minority, part of a minority opinion, or will I back down because I'm, you know, intimidated by a majority. So these are dilemmas that I experienced myself.
And do you have, because I think it's really interesting that Dilara mentioned an example of a woman that inspires her and gives her a feeling of strength. Do you also have these kind of examples?
Yes, and I'm very proud to see Kautar Bojalit in our second chamber now, and she's really showing how to hold your ground, stand for your values, even when you get so much hate. And it's very important to show the younger generation that you have the right to be there and that you need to continue your fight. And then, you know, I have myself very, very important role models, I believe.
Who are your, because we want to look them up, of course, who are your role models?
Well, one of them is Barack Obama. I got to meet him in 2019. I often know what to say, but when he was in front of me, asking me, so who are you? Tell
me. Was it here in the Netherlands or not?
No, it was in Germany. I just froze, you know. So Barack Obama and Kamala Harris, of course. And I also this week got to meet finally Mrs. Okonjo-Iweala. She's the first female and African WTO Director General of the World Trade Organization. And she was in the European Parliament. And I knew that morning I need to have a picture with her. So that was so impressive, you know. And I really told her, "Oh, you're such a role model," this is amazing what you've achieved.
I think I had a conversation a few months ago with someone who told we need European heroes, and we're speaking about role models, and I can also imagine that European youngsters might need kind of one person that is attractive for all Europeans and that is telling a real European story. And of course, if I'm looking at you, you are born in this era where Europe was united already. I mean, we had the euro and the borders were open, etc. I'm just looking for this hero, I think. Do you think that might help, Amara?
A hero, one role model.
One or more. Doesn't have to be one.
I think we passed the time of heroes. Even big companies are realizing that now. They are not so much looking at the big influencers anymore. They're looking at micro-influencers. I think people should realize that we all influence each other. Every single person today is an influencer through social media, through these kinds of conversations. Every word I say right now could plant a seed in someone's mind in this room or watching from home. And that could grow into new ideas and new principles, maybe even new movements. So maybe we should stop looking for heroes and big stories outside of ourselves and realize that every little story inside of us matters.
Sounds like a great idea, I think. Yeah, thank you so much.
It's so beautiful that everything you say is just like a song. It's like,
Write it
I'm like,
down.
oh my God, you're like, somebody should follow you the whole day, and then it's just, that person will sell many books.
I think you planted a lot of seeds
you
tonight as well.
Spreading seeds.
Yeah, thank you so much. I wanted to ask you a critical question, because there might be some older people looking at us tonight and think, you are the younger generation. We were the revolutionary voices in the 70s. We were the ones that went onto the street all the time. And you are just lazy young people who don't dare to fight for anything.
We've protested more. They've counted it.
Yeah.
There's actually a study being done. And our generation has protested a lot more.
Really?
Yeah, higher numbers, more protests than the 60s generation. So.
And what was the last thing you said?
More than the 60s, the generation, and the early 70s. So we've protested a lot more.
So actually, we should reframe the whole history.
We are
of
the protest generation. We really are. On more diverse topics. I mean, the older generation, sorry, but they also protest a lot for themselves, for their own housing, and then they went into all these houses here in Amsterdam and claimed them and wanted to build their own alternative societies. Also very inspiring. But we've protested for big issues like climate and racism and women's rights and LGBTQI and all those things. So we are the protest generation.
So actually you show that we're kind of already making this transformation to what Dilara mentioned in her keynote, that we needed to transform from an I society more into a we society, and maybe a more forward-looking society.
Definitely.
I'm not sure if people get really angry now, but...
No, I also really loved what you said earlier about creating this culture. I think that's really important because between the First World War and the Second World War, you actually had this really optimistic movement of young people in Europe, writers, philosophers, artists, who were all connected to each other. They were all friends. You have a lot of writers like Stephen Zweig and others who wrote diaries about how there was this European generation who really believed in change. And then, unfortunately, and then you come also to the fear part, then leading up to the Second World War and nationalism, this group of friends, of intellectuals, of artists, of thinkers, was actually torn apart out of fear of what's happening in their own national countries, and only two of like a really big group remained. And when I read that book, I was so it was really, I thought, what if they had more time to turn that friendship into like a real European institution? It could be an antidote against nationalism, against fear, against becoming cynical and distrusting each other. And I think that's really what we need, because we also see another movement of distrust, of polarization, of nationalism. So I think we need to hold on to each other and build that's really strong friendship and network in Europe as fast as we can, because it's really important.
Yeah, and not way too long. Indeed.
And not way too long.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Samira, I wanted to end with you actually, because I was wondering, we are speaking a lot, and I know that you are also speaking a lot with other youngsters in the country, right? You're doing a tour.
Yes.
You get a lot of information, but what can you as a politician do in the end? What are you going to do with these letters, with all this information? Or is there anything else you need from our side, from their side, in order to do something?
Yeah. Well, I do like to reiterate that, don't forget, I am part of a young generation too. Because I'm in politics doesn't mean that suddenly I'm not the young generation too.
No, but you are in a position of power. You are in a position of power.
But still, I mean, still I feel very, very much part of a younger generation too. But trying to change myself, the institutions that I'm part of, and trying to challenge the system. So I think what I can do in my work, of course, with all these very valuable input, and indeed the conversations that I have with young people across the country, is to start asking the right questions in the committees that I'm sitting in, the moment that I have the opportunity to do my controlling work. I think these are very valuable questions that I can raise. It starts with doing your job as a controller well, and also as being a negotiator on new legislative proposals. This helps me also to negotiate the right things, to negotiate the right provisions for people, to negotiate the right solutions for people.
Yeah.
And this is how it really helps me in my work. And I think, in general, as politicians, we just need to make sure that we stay into contact with young people, because that's also often a complaint that I hear. I mean, we cannot change it all. We cannot change the world ourselves, alone, but together, yes, if we organize. But I think in general, we speak less with the young people as politicians, and we need to pay attention to them, and we need to tell them, look, we are really willing to hear you. Just tell me what you like to see differently, and I can only do my best to incorporate that in all the things I do. Yeah,
maybe someday you can propose some of the ideas that you heard tonight. So that would be fantastic.
Yes, and basically, that's already what I'm doing. Often when you see my interventions in the committees, for example, all the questions that I raise, all the written parliamentary questions that I raise, are always based on conversations I had with people, with my constituencies. So I hope that people see that I'm reflecting that in my work. Yeah.
And just one final question, because I speak to a lot of politicians who tell me, I would love to speak with real people in the real world, but I just don't have time for it.
Well, the real people in the real world, okay, like as if they're like living on another planet.
No, but I can imagine if you have a week with 13 meetings, that it's hard to schedule conversations outside of your
No, but I think that's the mistake that they make in their thinking, because part of your work is to be informed. So yes, I have a lot of meetings too, but part of my work is to have these meetings and to organize these meetings. So because otherwise, how can you otherwise do your job right if people don't inform you?
It's a prerequisite in order to do your job well.
Yeah. Okay. I believe so.
Okay, thank you so much. I wanted to listen to a final hopeful message from Portugal, from Maria, who also wrote a letter in the book. Maria.
Hello everyone, I'm Maria Coelho and I'm from Portugal. As a young European, I have a more intimate view of what we young people have done and can do to help Europe continue to raise the name of peace, security, freedom and democracy. With regard to the European future once the pandemic subsides, we must not forget that the disease can be controlled, but its effects will certainly be felt in the long term, as it happened in previous crises. Within the economy, the European Union has taken measures that will certainly ensure the survival of all countries with the greatest homogeneity within member states. But the European spirit, strength, hope, will these have long-term consequences as well? I believe that the only consequence that it can have will be positive. The most certain thing is that we'll progressively be a strong Europe and more convinced in its values. Crises are more than ever challenges that show the weaknesses of the countries and regions, but they are also opportunities for future growth, showing unity, invested in hope. As a young Democrat and a future adult at Democrats, I will never forget this moment, that I attended classes at home, that I couldn't be with my friends for months, that I couldn't go to the parties I wanted, and make the most of high school. However, if I've been through this, if we have been through this, we can get through anything. And that's exactly how I expect all Europeans, young people and adults to see this whole controversy. Our main rule as young people is exactly to have hope. In such difficult times, hope is the solution. Having hope for the future, of the positive future, having hope for the entire European community and institutions, having hope for a world where there is freedom, equality, the rule of law, and human rights and democracy. Hope gives us strength to do what is needed. We will remain united in diversity.
Nice.
Thank you very much, Maria. I think a lot of the people who wrote the letter are also watching tonight, so I'm really proud of all of you who wrote the letter and who were here tonight, even with a pre-recorded video or live via Zoom. I think we're going to the final part of this evening, which is a final performance by Amara van der Elst. And this is a piece that you wrote especially for this evening, right, Amara?
Yes.
Is there something we need to know before you start, or?
It's in Dutch.
That's an important part.
Yeah.
We're going to translate it later on, but for now, I also hope that international people who are watching can really feel what you're trying to say. And as you mentioned in the other poem as well, language also overcomes a lot of things. So yeah, take the floor.
Ontstaan om grenzen te vervagen, heeft een land nog nooit zulke vrede grenzen gedragen. Vredesverdragen houden ons koest, maar oude gewoontes zitten ook in nieuw staal vastgeroest. We vechten voor, we vechten tegen onder het nom van solidariteit. Zal het met de tijd ontwikkelen? Leren we vergeven of blijven we in strijd verwikkeld, de doeken verstikkend? Kunnen we ze uitvouwen tot vredesvlaggen? Streven we naar gezag of een glimlach op het gezicht van onze kinderen? Wat is de definitie van winnen? Waar wij discussiëren over andermans vrijheden, waar alles onder voorwaarden van wat ik voor jou, jij voor mij deed. Voor welke waarden staan wij nog? Die 12 sterren op een blauwe vlag. Woorden kaatsen heen en weer, maar blijven nog te vaak in het net verstrikt als het gaat om discussies over komen en gaan van waarheen en waar vandaan. Kiezen we bezit als reden van bestaan, als oorzaak van ten ondergaan?
Hebben we de zon voor lief genomen? Wat als we gewoon voor liefde kozen? Was de nacht dan minder koud? We dragen de stenen, maar zien niet meer wat we samen hebben opgebouwd. En als je me vraagt naar de kern van dit verhaal, dan is mijn wedervraag: wat als we ons niet langer laten drijven door staal? En ons overgeven aan de zachte golven van de taal? Zullen we elkaar dan eindelijk verstaan? Weten we dan weer waar die 12 sterren op een blauwe vlag voor staan? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amara. We're about to close off this evening, but I wanted to give all of you one final opportunity to make sure that a lot of people who are watching this tonight will join this collective effort of making your voice heard. So let me start with Dilara, because she already knows a lot about the project. What do you want to say to people to make sure they're going to send us an email after this session to join our new network?
Well, I would say, just like I said, I hope that there will really come like a centralized thing, a centralized power, so to say, so to bundle all the ideas. But I also want to put emphasis on exactly what Amara also just said, that you don't need to search for like a hero or like a big thing. Mm-hmm. It starts really with yourself. It starts with like micro revolutions, with small steps in your own family, in your own, at your own school. So I would say, although the results will not be visible tomorrow or after a year or maybe not even in your life, I'd say just do what feels right, and as long as your moral compass, is not going all crazy, that's what's important, I think.
So also small steps are really important.
Micro-revolutions.
And if you would like your letter to be added to this document, to this growing manifesto, you can always send an email to info@cultureforum.eu, in which you propose your idea, and we would be happy to incorporate it into this bundle of letters. So please feel free to send us an email if you have ideas after this program. Talita, what would you like to say to your fellow Europeans?
Yeah, final remarks are also always a bit scary because you have to be inspirational. But
no, small steps are okay.
No, I think that we really have to. I've seen that you really like Hannah Arendt, and I had to think about what she said about becoming cynical, and that's and what I'm referring to what I said earlier. I think that's the biggest threat of our time is becoming cynical, that we feel too small to change anything because it's above our heads, and I think. We cannot allow that to happen. So we have to keep each other strong and believe that the younger generation has everything, the intellect, the vision, the language, the artistry, the poetry, the love, everything we need to change the world. And I think we really, if we trust that and send each other reminders, even though it's just an app or a small text to somebody like, hey, we're doing this for a reason, don't give up, we're changing the world. We need to keep the spirit high, and I think that's important. Yeah.
Great. Injetta, over to you. What would your last comment be?
Opposite to Dilara, I think that what I would say is that Latvian youth, at least from my opinion, needs this bigger push. Like the small steps have been taken, I believe. Like we need this bigger push, and as Samira also mentioned that maybe some kind of, I don't know, like funding or European actual like support could be implemented. I think that would be the most important thing that European youth could have, at least I believe from my point of view.
And what are you going to say to your fellow students to convince them to write a letter to the manifest?
Oh, best believe me, they are watching right now. I've sent everybody links to this live. So hopefully they are watching. Right. And I think that this will be inspirational to them. As I don't know, like for me, Samira was so inspirational. Like as me myself, as a young person, young woman studying politics and not being like natively like from the bigger European countries, I don't know, it was just inspirational to listen to kind of your thought process or how you approach things and how you kind of are an activist as a younger woman in politics. So that was really inspirational to me. I hope so that to many others out there.
Great, thank you so much, Iñeta. Amara, final remark by you. What would you say to your fellow Europeans?
Taking in everything that I've heard, I think it's nice to remember how important mindset is. You only need 10% of people in a group to believe in a certain idea to change the mindset of that whole group. So maybe that helps a bit with the optimism.
Thank you so much. Samira.
So first of all, I would like to start that I'm really extremely proud of you and Iñeta, all the work that you do as really young, brave, young women also.
That's a coincidence. There were also a lot of
but I do want to reiterate that because it's very important that we are also out there and that we also show that given the challenges that we sometimes face because of who we are, how we look, that we have a right to be there and a right to be represented. So I'm really proud of all the work that you do, and just keep going in what you believe in, and you will definitely face. So I say that this to all the young people watching. You will definitely face some difficulties, sometimes a lot of difficulties, and people will sometimes try to make you believe differently. But hold on to your own values and hold on to your standards and never lower your standards because other people do. So stay true to yourself.
Thank you for these wonderful last words, Samira. I wanted to thank all the people again who wrote the letter. I want to thank the speakers over here, also the partners that worked together on this evening with the Bali, which is the Forum on European Culture, Company New Heroes, and Dutch Culture. Thank you for watching at home. If you want to watch more programs of the Bali, please take a look at the website or the Bali TV. I hope to see you back another day, hopefully also live here in the Bali. And thank you very much for watching tonight.